George Asher Meza has finally come under a lot of heat from the real Orthodox Jewish community after he had a run-in with a real, authentic, incredible rabbi. George Asher Meza is finally getting the scrutiny he deserves from these sources, among others. In his latest video entitled, What Rabbi Asher Meza Believes, a rather bombastic and desperate attempt at damage control, he addresses these issues.
Opposing me because of what I believe and teach, just on the basis that they do not agree. And you know what? That's fine. People don't have to agree with everything I teach. However, friends, the problem begins when this objection to my work gets reworded.
So your arguments get reworded. Okay. Isn't it a bit funny that you use the very thing you accuse others of doing to defend yourself? Or did you think that people would be too stupid to realize that just because you accuse someone else of something, it doesn't mean that you aren't doing it right now?
As Rabbi Asher just holds by a different understanding of a certain halachic or hashkafic issue.
Blah, 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 blah. Me.
But instead, that Rabbi Asher is teaching heretical ideas. So friends, today I'm going to break down what I teach and believe so that people, if they are going to judge or critique me, could do it more accurately.
So now, just like any other cult leader, you're trying to control the debate as if individuals have to abide by the rules that you set in debating them. In addition, you're trying to make the claim that any criticism of yourself is thereby inaccurate because of anything that could be wrong, Mr. Meza, it surely can't be you.
So we'll start with conversion. Many have stated that Rabbi Asher makes up his own standards for conversion. Now, this is solely built on the basis that what I teach on the issue is not what is practiced today. And friends, to this I must remind you of the notion that only because something is not done today does not mean it is wrong or not sanctioned by Torah or halakha. Actually, this form of thinking arose by an unfounded notion that modern rabbis do not make mistakes.
And here we go. You continue to speak out against the rabbis. You can't paint yourself out to be some great reviver of true Judaism just because you appeal to some misguided notion of social justice. Really, Mr. Meza? Your missionary style is no different than any other missionary. Denigrate the rabbis, as if they are at fault for why your beliefs are rejected. Anything else, Mr. Meza, is to blame, except for you, right? Just take a YouTube show put on by the San Francisco Office of Jews for JC. What is their title? What the rabbis won't tell you. Because the rabbis are certainly ones to blame for why, quote, true Judaism isn't practiced by real Jews. Just like the rabbis are the reason why real Jews reject JC, right, George? It couldn't be that those rabbis are Judaism, that these rabbis are the only way real Judaism has been preserved. Oh, no. But then again, George, just parachute in and pretend like you know more about Judaism than any real rabbi over the past 1400 years. I mean, you are, after all, the only Jew who still learns, understands, and teaches Judaism in its purest form. And we would be nowhere without you.
Or that only because some rabbi says something today that it in some way rewrites Torah and halakha. Well, friends, this is obviously not the way Judaism functions. For example, I proselytize, and as many also know, I do not hide my beliefs on this issue. And I know that to many this may sound heretical.
Mr. Meza, you are completely misrepresenting the arguments against you. Once again, you're trying to appeal to your base and say that, oh, it's because of conversions. We don't like the fact that you proselytize Judaism. Mr. Meza, this is a pathetic display. You're completely misrepresenting the attacks against you. It has nothing to do with the fact that you proselytize Judaism. It has to do with the Judaism that you're proselytizing. What you are teaching non-Jews and maybe some wayward Jews trying to find their way back to God is not Judaism. Mr. Meza, you have put yourself in a very self-inflated position to say that you have the truth and everyone else is wrong. Think that just because you flood YouTube with your videos, that somehow that makes you legitimate. And perhaps in the minds of unsuspecting people who come across, they might assume that, yeah, you're a legitimate guy. That's why you call yourself a rabbi. You go all out of your way to provide some fluke smicha that you've blurred out because you know that this title has respect from people. You don't really respect the title, as you've made clear in many of your videos, but you know that most people do. And that's why you distribute this little piece of paper here saying that at one point in time you were currently enrolled. But you know what it doesn't say is it doesn't say that you actually achieved any academic achievement. You didn't complete any curriculum, but you know that people expect a rabbi to have studied in yeshiva, and so you say, hey, I did the same thing as everyone else. I'm just like everyone else. Now let's be clear on what exactly the issues are with what you teach. You teach people things that go contrary to normative and authentic Judaism, such as teaching that tashlik is some sort of pagan ritual that you shouldn't be practicing, or that the Jewish Bible prohibits the consumption of alcohol to the point of inebriation. Commending people to not drink on Purim because this is a great sin and it causes lots of heartache. And you even said that you...
Because I'm going to be trampling upon some of the words of our sages. I'm going to be trampling upon some of the words of our sages. I'm going to be trampling upon some of the words of our sages. I'm going to be trampling upon some of the words of our sages.
What's probably the most laughable about that, Mr. Meza, is that you had the chutzpah to go and lecture Rabbi Katz about how you accept Chazal. Right? That's what you lectured him about that, and you just admitted in this video about Beshert and how it's all just a lie to keep you trapped in a relationship that you don't want, that you trample upon the words of the sages. And indeed, most of what you teach has to be done by trampling upon the words of the sages, particularly modern rabbis who have more authority than you could ever dream of achieving.
Even married, the notion of your besheret is liable to make you profoundly question whether you are with who you're supposed to be with.
As if you're the one who's going to lecture us about what it takes to have a great marriage. But all jokes aside, this is just a little bit of why we reject your teachings. The point is, Mr. Meza, you have misrepresented the arguments against you. So in a way, you're kind of rebuking the argument that you created. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who rebuke you for proselytizing. However, that's not really the focus of why people reject you.
Judaism, as you know, never taught against this. So what's the problem? Oh, what, that your rabbi told you that it's not allowed in Judaism? Well, did you ever ask your rabbi, where does it state this? Did you ever ask him?
In a way, you are vicariously referring to the main argument against you. That is, you do not respect Judaism. You do not respect the rabbis. You do not respect the process of the oral law. You think that you can parachute onto some source text and that is your Mezora. You become your own Rav, and you do not answer to anyone's authority. The things that you teach are not things that were taught to you and that you have the authority to teach. You essentially are going in and remaking it according to your own design.
Halakha, or just tradition or custom. And if just a custom, when did it begin? Well, the truth is that there is not, nor has ever been, a prohibition against proselytizing in the Jewish world, neither in...
And here you're still blabbing on about something that is not the issue.
Nor in any Mishnaic, Hashkafic, nor halachic source.
But once again, you know better than anyone else. So let's skip all of this blabbing on and let's get to why you think that Jews, as you see them, don't want to proselytize. This is where it gets really good and completely absurd.
Only began post the 13th century, based on some Kabbalistic notion of non-Jews being intrinsically spiritually inferior.
Ah, there, finally we got to it. Meza finally said what it's all about. Jews don't like proselytizing because they're racist. And they just don't want the non-Jewish world to have the truth. Now, if anyone were to ponder, what do you think Mr. Meza bases this off of? Well, we don't have to go very far. All we have to do is look on his various videos about Chabad. He bases this off of the first chapter of the Tanya. Now, surely Mr. Meza isn't basing his whole thesis on Hasidus and Chabad based off of the first chapter of the Tanya. I mean, I would expect a rabbi like Mr. Meza could possibly go beyond the first chapter. I mean, it's pretty lazy to like read the first chapter and think you know it all. You know, funny for somebody quoting the Vilna Gaon against Chabad, and yet he's the one using a half-truth and thinking that it's some sort of great revelation and some universal truth that gives him some moral justice in the world. Well, you see, the same author of the Tanya cleared it up in many other documents, which I don't imagine Mr. Meza got around to reading, but that the things that were said in the first chapter of the Tanya that he thinks he knows better than the rest of us, and he thinks he knows better than Chabad rabbis themselves, he clarified that that wording does not apply to non-Jews who are not idolaters.
But everyone knows it. George Asher Meza, he's a real rabbi. He could read more than just the first chapter of a book. He's a rabbi. He studied it for a long time, and his theses are well-founded in his research.
You know, there actually is an unsung history that George isn't really telling you about when it comes to why he thinks Jews don't like converts or why they don't like non-Jews. He even said, oh, they kicked my disciples out of synagogues here in Denver because they just don't like non-Jews. But that's not true. See, once again, he is blaming everyone except for himself. Denver is very friendly to converts. You know what they were not friendly to? George. You see, their problem was with George, not non-Jews. And now, instead of accepting responsibility for what happened here in Denver, George is blaming everyone except for himself. Surely. I mean, who could be wrong? I mean, George can't be wrong in George's eyes. I mean, he's number one totally awesome cool guy. Or in different terms, he's the Uberav, halachic authority, supreme in all things rabbinic, right? He's number one, and he's out to prove it. He can't be number two. He's number one. The thing is that Denver also has an established way of conversion. What George and Gallagher did is that they came in and they offered people a way of converting without all the work. So naturally, when George would come and parade his, quote, converts, air quote, he was upset that the rest of the Jewish community here didn't just accept them as Jewish, and they didn't accept George as a rabbi. And so George got offended. And now he's out to blame Jews for a racism that doesn't exist. The only thing that exists in Judaism, perhaps, and I don't mean to speak for all Judaism, I'm not an egocentric narcissist like George, but I think the only thing that might exist is maybe Jews don't like George Meza. Just something to think about. But there, I think we pretty well summarized what George thinks people are rebuking him for, which is that he proselytizes. And remember, George's basic thesis is that Jews don't like to proselytize because they're racist against non-Jews. That's pretty much it. And I think that's pretty much all we're going to cover for his first point. His such brilliance. And no wonder that he's going to be one of the two converts to wake up the world. As you could see from that video, there's no wonder that this guy, I mean, how can you question him? I mean, he's so brilliant. But in the meantime, Asher, until we get to the next video, let's have a little word from our sponsor.
Do you want to be a rabbi? But you think you have to spend all those grueling years in yeshiva? Well, now you don't have to. With Dordei Smicha, you can be your own internet rabbi. Start a new religion. Speak lies about the rest of Judaism. And give your life the meaning you've always needed. We've pre-blared our credentials and seals so no pesky doubter can question you with research. Get yours today! Get the respect you think you deserve.
Rejection, equal worship, and the banishment from the Jewish community.